Well, from time to time, you may need to prorate rent for a client or a customer. If you're selling a single-family investment property, perhaps a duplex or a four-family, rental prorations will play a part of calculating how much the seller will net on the day of closing. Now, first and foremost, I want to remind you, first of all, for those of you who are members of the National Association of Realtors, our Code of Ethics tells us we're not really supposed to get involved in areas that are outside our expertise. Now, I get it. Many of us will handle a duplex or a rental investment property for clients, but it's always good to make sure that you note on the listing agreement that perhaps this is not a type of property that you list on a regular basis. You're going to assist input and advice from others in your office or perhaps friends or colleagues who deal in this type of property that will give you some direction. But very good for you to make sure you disclaim or disclose that to conform with the Code of Ethics. Now, if you're not part of the National Association of Realtors, you could be watching this and say, hey, I'm not joining the National Association of Realtors, so I don't have to worry about that. And the answer is you just might have to worry about it because remember, anytime there's a listing agreement between the seller and the broker, and you're involved with your broker as an agent for your broker, so you still have fiduciary obligations to your client, the seller, you still need to disclose, I think, that this is not your wheelhouse. This is not something you do on a regular basis. But as long as your client's okay with you handling it, you disclose that to them, and you seek advice and expertise or consult with someone in your office or, again, a colleague or someone in your local area who works those types of properties, then I think everything will be fine. Bottom line is this: talk to your broker, okay? Make sure your broker, your manager, gives you advice on how to address or make note of that on your agreement. So let's get right into this math problem, and we are going to go over to the board and take a look at this problem where Mike and Misty own a rental building that they're planning to sell. The rent is $2,500 per month, and the closing takes place on the 7th of the month. Which of the following correctly matches the proration for the settlement statement? Now, I think it's important for you to remember that rents are paid what? How? Good job. In advance. So let's remember that rents are paid in advance. A-V-A-N-C-E. I'll fix that right there. So we want to remember that rents are paid advance. There we go. Little different than taxes, because remember, taxes and mortgage interest, I'm going to abbreviate this here, are paid in arrears, okay? They are not paid in advance. Let's just go over this real quickly so we understand this. If you're paying mortgage interest, when you pay your mortgage payment, so I'm going to put this here, mortgage interest, when you make your mortgage payment on May 1st, you are actually paying for the month of April because mortgage interest is paid in arrears. So if you were to close on May the 7th, we have what is called accrued interest. So there will be 7 days of interest that the seller will owe because we'll have a loan balance on May 1st, but remember, that payment actually paid for April. So now we've accumulated 7 days of mortgage interest. Now here we're talking about rent. And rent is paid in advance. So let's bring this down. So in this situation, if the property is going to close on the 7th of the month, we basically just need to take 30 days and subtract 7 days, which gives us 23 days. So keep this in mind. The seller collected the $2,500 on the 1st of the month. So if you were the seller and I'm the tenant and I paid you $2,500 on the 1st of the month, then you've collected all $2,500. Now you're selling the property on the 7th. So there's 23 days of interest you need to turn over to the new buyer. So we've got our number of days here, 23. Now we just need to take this $2,500 per month and find out what the monthly or the daily, rent is. So $2,500, this is the rent. We're going to divide it by 30 days. And when I do that, I believe it's $83.33. 2,500 divided by 30 equals $83.33. That's your daily amount. And remember, we owe the buyer 23 days of rent. So we just multiply the daily amount times the 23 days that we owe, and that gives me $1,916.67. And that will be noted on the closing statement as a debit to the seller. Remember, the seller has already collected the whole month's rent, so we need to charge them for 23 days, and that will be a credit to the buyer, who is the new owner, and they will earn the rent for the remaining 23 days. So these problems are not that challenging and not that difficult. However, we do have to make prorations for the rent that is due the new buyer, because rents are paid in advance. And so if those rents are collected on the 1st of the month, then we need to make sure that the buyer receives their fair share for the remaining days of the month. And that would be, again, from the day of closing through the end of the month. And the easiest way for me is just to take 30 days out of the month and subtract the day you're closing, in our case, the 7th, and that means there are 23 days remaining, and we want to debit or charge the seller and credit the buyer. Now, don't forget, you will have security deposits. Sometimes people pay not only a security deposit, but an additional month's rent. It's your job as the agent to make sure you cover all of those facts and details so that when closing day comes, you've got a good record and you know what the sellers received in advance as far as security deposits or prepaid rents, and also need to know if those tenants have paid their monies on the month that we're closing. Sometimes you may have a tenant that's late or delinquent, hasn't paid their rent. So you want to make sure all of that information is known and disclosed prior to closing. Well, good job on this rental math problem. I hope this helped you out. We'll keep moving along with the course right now.